Hello, I'm Petru, you're watching WellCode, and I'm here with Rachel, who did a lot of incredible stuff like working for Disney, for Amazon. She's right now at MIT, which you may know that's one of the best universities in the world for doing computer science. And we're doing an interview and trying to show you how you can start and how you can become successful in your future computer science career. What were you doing before doing computer science? What was your life before? How did it look like?
So before I got into computer science, I guess my focus was always just I wanted to be an inventor. I didn't know if that was a real career or not, but I was like, I just want to see problems and build them. And I didn't necessarily have the skills in order to build them, but I would just learn whatever I needed to do in order to identify that problem space and to solve it. And so before I was going into computer science, I was just inventing things. So I would invent toys in kindergarten, or if we had problems where things were constantly spilling in our suitcases, like I invented like special bottles in order to stop them from spilling over. So that's kind of what I was always into, just figuring out what the problems were and fixing them, like no matter what.
Okay, that sounds really interesting. So, have you tried to sell any of your inventions, or they're just side projects which at some point you quit doing?
I think mostly right now they're side projects, just because I don't want to have to think about how to manufacture them on mass scale. Like the most exciting thing for me is just building them the first time around and maybe perfecting that design, but actually figuring out how to make money off of it, I feel like that would put the focus away from actually experimenting and actually doing things.
Okay, yeah. And how did you hear about computer science? I assume that, so from what I know in the US, computer science not mandatory, or how did you encounter it?
Yeah, so it's not, so at my high school it wasn't mandatory, but I had sort of exhausted all of the classes at my high school, and so one of the last ones that was left, and I was in like 10th grade, so I had 2 more years to go, and computer science was a class I hadn't taken yet. So I signed up for the class, and there were, once I got in there were only 3 other girls in the class, which was a little bit intimidating. And in addition, the first words the computer science teacher told the entire class was that no girl has ever passed this class. And so just kind of hearing that, as well as just being extremely stubborn and wanting to do the things that people tell me I can't do, I was like, I will become good at computer science. And yeah, that was kind of how I got into it.
And what technologies were you studying, or how did the class look like?
Yeah, so the class was a Java class, so you kind of just went through a textbook on Java topics, and with every chapter you were given a series of exercises to do. Yeah, it was just a lot of like really fun, sometimes trivial questions, but they were like fun, like little games for the mind.
Questions, you mean you didn't write code on a computer, or what do you mean by questions?
Oh, I meant that, so basically there was a website, I think it was called like Java Bat or something, and it had these like questions like, you want to decide how much to pay this customer, the payment is based on X, Y, and Z, write a program that will automatically assign a payment, and then it would run through, it would check it right there online.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was automatically created.
Yeah.
And one interesting thing is that a lot of people who become computer scientists, they don't get it from the beginning. Did you understand everything from the beginning, or were you more like a slower learner?
Yeah, I definitely didn't understand everything from the beginning. I remember at the very beginning, when it was like very simple things, I would get in, I'm like, I'm so smart, I got this, I'm gonna be like the best programmer ever. And then after a while, the questions got a lot harder. You had to write much more in-depth code for it, and I realized that I wasn't as good at it as I thought I was. And so that was definitely a struggle, and there were definitely points where I was like, I've been working on this code for half a day, and that means if I don't get it now, I'll never get it. And that was definitely frustrating, but learning to work past that, and when you do finally solve it, it's like always very rewarding.
How did you learn to work past that? What were the things you were telling to yourself, or what strategies did you apply not to get depressed and
I mean, I was telling myself that if I don't finish this assignment, I'll fail the class, which is generally good motivation. But I think what's really sad is if you spend a lot of time on something and 6 hours in you give up and then you know you'll never accomplish it. And I think what kept me going was knowing that if I kept trying at it, then eventually I would have to get to a solution. And if I just stopped now, I would be wasting all of the time that I had put to getting that far.
Yeah, that thing helps a lot. I have that thing too, but unfortunately sometimes I pick up a book which is not so interesting, and because I read half through it, I think that I have to finish the other half, and it's sometimes it just feels like a waste of time.
Yeah, I get the same way about theoretical parts of computer science when it's like much more exciting to like actually work on something practical. So oftentimes when we get to that point, I'll try to sort of figure out what the resource the textbook was trying to teach me was, and then Google the practical applications of it. And even if you can't learn the topic from the practical applications, it generally makes me personally more motivated to like want to finish reading, because I'm like, oh, I know what I'll be using this for after.
Yeah. And how long was the class? 1 year or?
It was a semester. So from January to June.
Okay, so you did the class.
Yeah.
You knew Java. What did you do afterwards?
Afterwards, I decided I'd heard about this really cool program at Michigan State University where they let high schoolers do research. And so I'd applied for that and got in. And so I came there and I was given this research project, and they were like, so you know Python, right? And I was like, well, I'm like halfway across the country. I guess I have to know Python. And so then the next thing I did in terms of computer science was just spend a summer learning Python and using Python for figuring out stress factors that affect plants and how we can genetically engineer plants that won't die in the dehydration. Yeah,
it sounds really interesting. I bet there were a lot of people applying. How did you write your application? What do you think there were important things for? Because you got there, then you got to MIT, you got to Disney, so I think you're really skilled at applying at things and getting into places where it's really hard to go.
I try. I don't know if there are secrets per se. I guess in terms of like speaking to both college and this particular summer program, I know a lot of people tend to write one essay and just submit it everywhere, and I guess what I've always done is like legitimately think really hard about like why I wanted to apply to this specific thing, and doing a lot of research and making sure that in my essays I make clear why this specific place is the right place for me, whether that's because of the professors that are there, that specific research that only exists in that one place, and stuff like that. And I don't know, I think generally I don't like writing essays. Like, I'm a programmer, not a writer. Like, I don't enjoy it, but when I do a lot of research on whatever I'm applying to, it makes me like legitimately really excited to talk about like why I want to do this thing, and that generally I think helps in the essays, because I think that excitement can be shown through that.
So you've learned Python during the summer.
Yeah.
And what was next?
Next was just applying to colleges. So I didn't do a lot of programming the next year. And then I came to MIT, which is also heavily Python based. So most of my work so far has been in Python.
Let's go back a bit. So how did you get into MIT? Because I bet that a lot of people...
I ask myself that every day. How did I get into MIT?
Yeah, because in Romania, the only people who get there are the ones who have like gold medals at international competitions, the crazy, hardworking people who are also really smart. So it's not enough to just be hardworking. You either have to be like day and night, or you also have to be like really smart.
I don't know, maybe we put the application in the wrong place. I don't know. I don't think I did anything particularly special. I think I've just always, like, obviously getting good grades and like getting good test scores. The numbers are important. Besides that, I think just being a well-rounded person is really important. Like, I was a pretty successful gymnast back then, and I think that was like important for MIT to know that you are a well-rounded person and you're not just this one thing. In terms of technical things, I think it's always great to have like a single project that sets you apart from everyone else. And I think for me, there was a project that I actually got a patent on, and I think that was probably the thing that like differentiated me from the other applicants.
Oh, so you got the patent at, how old were you when you got it?
Like 16.
16, okay.
Yeah.
But do you think it's possible for people who don't have a patent to go to MIT, or maybe to become really successful software engineers?
Yeah, I mean, a patent is just a piece of paper. It was just a way of formalizing the work that I put in. But I think that MIT and all these other institutions, what they really value is you having something that you worked on that you're super excited about. And so regardless of whether you actually make a company out of it or put it into writing, just having something that you've worked on, that you've dedicated a lot of time to, that genuinely excites you, like a side project, I think that's the most valuable thing you can have, and the thing that MIT and other universities like it really appreciate, because it shows, it just shows that you're not doing technical work for school or because somebody told you that you have to, but spending your free time working on projects that genuinely excite you, that shows that you want to be a programmer for life, and that's something that you are really committed to being.
Okay, so you got there. Was it difficult? How are the courses, and how is also the atmosphere being surrounded by all the best people in the world?
Yeah. Oh, it's so great. I think what's really awesome about MIT is that you get to learn not just from the courses but also the people around you. So it's this constant process of like being intelligent by diffusion. Just through having interesting conversations, I feel like you become smarter. Actually, part of the reason I wanted to come to MIT, just like going backwards to when I was like 12 years old, was because one time I was in a hotel in Boston and an MIT professor just sat down at a table with this 12-year-old girl and her mother and started talking about her like neuroscience research and how she was going to be presenting at a conference later that day. And I think that's what I've always associated with MIT and Boston, just people that are very passionate about their work and also willing to talk to you about it. And it's through these conversations that you learn a lot. And so the first semester at MIT is PNR, which means pass or no record. So does that make sense?
What's that?
So you know how classes are like A, B, C, D, F?
Yeah.
So during your first semester at MIT, you can either get a pass, so nobody will know whether you got an A, B, or a C, or it's just not on your record at all. So you can't fail your first semester. And so that freedom really encourages you to explore like all the different avenues that MIT has to offer. And so I know I definitely like overwhelmed myself with like various clubs and different research opportunities just because you have the chance to do that and you just want to soak it all in while you have the chance. That was kind of my first impression of MIT. They call it the fire hose because you're like, they say going to MIT is like drinking out of the fire hose, as in like it's all very fast paced and like it attacks you all the time, but it's actually really rewarding if you're able to just like stand it.
Yeah, sounds cool.
Yeah.
And what were some challenging parts about MIT? Which were the maybe downsides or just the biggest challenges?
I think the biggest challenge, and I know a lot of people say this, but there's this impostor syndrome when you're there, just because you are surrounded by the best of the best. And I know I'm like still struggling with that, where I'm like, it takes me a week to do this assignment and it took my friend a day. Like, why am I so behind? I don't belong here. And that's something that you constantly feel when you're there, which makes it really difficult. And there's no real solution to it other than just moving forward, and I think spending your time doing things that you think eventually will make you feel like you're worth it. That's like kind of the only way to go about solving it.
Yeah, because just sitting there and thinking that, oh, I'm not smart enough doesn't make you smarter.
Yeah.
And in order to pass, you have to become smarter, just do your work. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And do you think this was specific to MIT or it's happened to you before? Because my manager at Google told me that at some point during your internship you'll feel the imposter syndrome, and that's fine.
Yeah. I think prior to coming to MIT, I had never felt it at that level, just because in high school it was never that bad. I went to like a public high school, so it was like that's kind of what I worked for, was to be the best at the high school, and it was something that wasn't unattainable. Like, it was a goal. I'm not saying that I reached it, but I could see that I was on the steps of getting there. Versus with MIT, it's like if you're climbing a mountain but you can't see the top. Like, it doesn't feel like you'll ever be able to be as good as everyone around you. So I think I've never felt it at that caliber as MIT, but I've felt it at other companies I've worked at for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so you got there. How did you apply to Disney, or how did you decide where to go, which company to choose?
Yeah. So for my freshman year, for my internship, I really wanted to work at a smaller company, just because I thought that I really wanted to see how everything works. Like, and I'm sure you could speak more to this, but I think that when you work at a bigger company, you get to know your one thing really well. And in order to understand which one thing I wanted to focus on, I wanted to work at a startup where I get to do a lot of everything to really understand what was the thing that I wanted to focus on. What was the question?
Yeah, how did you choose companies?
Yes. So the way I choose companies is by thinking about what I want to get out of that experience. So for my freshman year, I knew I wanted a startup, small experience, get everything out of it. And then for my sophomore year, which I'm in now, I wanted to get the opposite of that experience and understand what a bigger company feels like, what it's like to be working amongst kind of just being like one small cog in the wheel of this entire company. And so that's why I chose Disney. In addition to being a company that I was like emotionally connected to, the location was really great. I'm originally from LA, and I knew that this was something that was important to me, was to be back in California. And so I think it was just a combination of factors that made me really excited about Disney. Also, another thing I really liked about Disney, and I'm sure a lot of big companies have this, is this sort of freedom of money where you can experiment more than you can with a smaller company. You don't just have to work on essential features. You think something could potentially be useful 10 years down the road, like Disney will let you work on that.
Really? As an intern?
Yeah.
Wow,
well, I'm not allowed to think up of the projects, but I'm allowed to pitch them, and then if they're adopted, then work on it.
You already had like the research project, you had MIT on your CV. Were there any other things that you worked for in order to make sure that you'll get all the interviews?
For companies?
Yeah.
For companies, I'd say I was just always doing coding practice. Like there's a lot of really great websites online and a lot of great tutorials online for becoming a better programmer. And so I think it was just practice for me, was to make sure that I wouldn't get stumped by any of the questions they threw my way.
Yeah, there's a lot of stress with interviews. Have you felt it?
I'm stressed right now because we're about to go into the next recruiting season for internships. So I feel a lot of stress about not messing up and making sure that I do to the best of my abilities at the interviews.
So how is it being at a demanding university compared to working for a company? What are the differences? Do you feel more pressure at the college, or do you feel more pressure at the company?
Yeah, so I think definitely the pressure is a lot heavier at a company, just because you're handling code that, if broken, will completely cut off revenue for a company or will completely like derail all of their other efforts. So making sure to write good code is a lot more important, I feel like, at a company. In addition, something that's very different at companies is that you have to write not just working code but good code, because at college, a lot of times what happens is that you work on assignment, your code works, it passes all the tests, and then you'll never look at it again, right? Like you're done with that. Versus with a company, the code that you write now, 5 years from now, another engineer will come and have to build off of it, or they'll have to like restructure it. And if you don't comment your code, if you write it in like a really convoluted, stupid way, then you're just making things so much harder for this company. And they'll tell you that now. Like they will, if you write bad code for a company, they will make you rewrite it. And so that was definitely took some getting used to, because I just wanted to finish project after project after project. I was like, this is working, I'm done. And they were like, no, hold up. Your code quality is what's important, not just the quantity of the code that you write.
Yeah, and I feel that that also helps you in the way of thinking, maybe. For me, it helped me because I was structuring my thought, being more careful about whether a solution works, because I was also just write code really fast.
Yeah.
It works, but after testing it more carefully, it doesn't.
And I think that makes it more interesting, right? Because I think that a big reason you go into computer science is because you're solving interesting problems, and then once you become aware of all the different dimensions of the problem, like speed, memory, things like that, it just makes that problem that you're solving so much more interesting, ultimately. So I think it's cool to think about those things as well.
And if we're doing comparisons, how would you compare working for a startup to working at large companies?
So the work that you're doing at a large company is a lot more specific. Like you come on for a single role and you will be working on a project or even like a small piece of that project, which is really different because at the startup I was working on, I was doing back end, front end. Sometimes I would get into the marketing just for fun. So you wear a lot of hats at a smaller company versus for a big company you get to learn your thing really well, which I think is super valuable because you realize there is a depth to the project that you're working on that you didn't realize that was there. Yeah, I would say that's a big difference. And also, depending on the company, of course, bigger companies might be more willing to let you experiment and work with new technologies that there isn't necessarily a proven use for, but you think that potentially there will be a use for it somewhere down the line.
I bet that a lot of you guys are wondering, what's she working for Disney? Is she working on the next show? Can you tell us more of what you're working on, or is it more secret?
So I think something that Disney focuses on a lot beyond just creating a movie or a show is making sure the characters and the environment of that movie or show have a world around them, and making it feel like these aren't just singular events, but these are part of like a greater universe. And so I don't think I can go into the specifics of my project, but it's a lot about creating these immersive experiences that will make people feel more like they're within the world of Disney.
So you're working on the tools for creating this kind of environments?
Yeah, so I'm testing out some new technologies and attempting to create an environment like this for the first time. And so that's one of my projects. And in addition, I'm working on seeing how we can use these like new tools that are out there, like better computer vision and EEGs, and so like these devices that can measure your brain waves to actually like optimize productivity at Disney.
Productivity? You mean how efficient the workers are?
So not like we're gonna put brain reading devices onto their heads and make sure that they're thinking about their work all the time. Like not that level of productivity, but that would be bad. But kind of the work we're doing is figuring out. So I guess every new technology has this like use case that if we find it, it will make our work more productive. And so we're trying to see if we can use the brain and kind of binary decisions made by the brain to make certain processes in machine learning more efficient.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I can ask you more details.
Yeah.
But yeah, an interesting part of being an intern at an important company is that you hear a lot about secret projects. I remember when I was at Palantir, we had an engineer telling us how were the beginnings of them working with the government, and it was really interesting. It's not like just so you don't imagine that we know really secret things. They won't tell us the really important trade secrets or the competitive advantages, but it still feels good that you know some things which a lot of people don't.
Yeah, all my friends keep asking me if I know like what the next Disney movie will be, or like stuff like that. I'm like, I don't know. I'm just an intern and I'm not that important.
Yeah. I also remember when I was at Facebook, they already had those reactions implemented back when Facebook had only the like button. And I was always wanting to share that with all my friends, but I wasn't able to do that. And at some point, I think there was this article that Facebook was testing this feature in New Zealand, and I could share that because it was a public article. But
you're like, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So, what are your plans for the future? What do you think you'll do for the next years? What do you think there are some hot topics in computer science?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think, well, personally, an area that I'm really interested in and exploring more over the course of my internship is machine learning and working like recurrent neural nets and just figuring out what is the potential for these kinds of technologies. And this is definitely like a hot topic in like all companies right now. And so I imagine that in the future I'll be working with something along those lines. But I think what's really exciting about computer science is that even though we're getting a faint understanding of what the tools will be, we're not still sure what the best applications for them will be. So I'm like kind of leaving that open to the universe to figure out exactly what I'll be applying these tools too in the future.
Yeah, I feel we experienced really, really interesting times compared to when I was a child, and you were lucky if you had a computer at home.
I remember like the first computer I saw, like it was like this thick, you know, like it was these massive monitors and everything. And now you can become a programmer like a lot easier than you could back then because you have all the tools at your disposal.
Yeah, and it's also more fun. You have AR, you just pull out your phone and you have this world around you, which isn't necessarily.
Yeah, that's also something I potentially want to explore. Like one of my side projects right now that like I'm just working on in my free time is like figuring out how to build an AR headset with certain capabilities that I think are currently lacking in AR headsets. So yeah, I think AR is going to be a big thing, and I'm really excited to see like what people are going to do about it. Yeah. But also with all the exciting things going on, it's important to like not get sucked in by buzzwords. That's something that I'm very scared of.
Yeah, because you can just work or hear about a machine learning project. Oh, I'm gonna work for that, and you end up just doing a pipeline for.
Yes. No, the worst thing I think is when you end up just writing the training data for the machine learning model. I think that's that's a computer science student's equivalent of like fetching coffee for an internship. It's just writing training data.
Yeah, it's a hard thing just to keep the balance between being grateful that you reached a certain point or work for a good company, but also not just be happy to do like regular work.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, what is your advice for people who are what's your advice for people who want to start computer science, want to learn? What do you think are the best things to do?
I think the best thing that a person can do is recognize that programming is a mindset less so than it is any particular language. And so I think what I would really recommend people focus on is learning how to think about a programmer. And I think you could even see, like you were mentioning, how now you think about the world in a little bit of a different way. You think about it in terms of how a programmer would think of it. And so I think if anyone's trying to get into computer science and doesn't necessarily like have the resources such as like that easy access to like a computer or tutorials, just what would be really helpful is just like learning to think about the world in a way that a programmer would, and sort of even when you're doing like your math homework, thinking like how would I write a program that would do this homework for me. That was like a big thing for me. And like I remember I did speech and debate in high school, and I would think about crafting the arguments for my debates the way a programmer would. And I just think that's becomes very beneficial because once you write it, it's like learning any other language. And that's the thing why I think a lot of programmers are able to switch between Java, Python, C++, like all super easily, because it's just a language. Like you'll learn it, or else you'll just look it up on Stack Overflow. Like that's not the hardest part. The hardest part is just learning how to think properly and understand the problems at a level that allows you to come to a solution for them. So I think that's the thing that I would really recommend, is just learning how to calibrate your thinking to a way that works well with computer science.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think it changes your whole worldview at some point. Just you're in the store and you have to get the change if you're paying with cash, but here you don't pay with cash anymore, so maybe you won't understand.
Now we pay with Bitcoin.
But you start thinking about how much change you need to get, or you run all these crazy things like, I wonder how do they put the boxes so perfectly, how you can automate all the processes, and your mind gets in a different direction. And the second thing I want to just underline is about the programming language. There are a lot of people these days who just, what's the best programming language I can learn? What do you think about JavaScript, or should I learn Python? And I always tell them it doesn't matter, just try to focus on the mindset and how to be able to think in this new, different way.
Yeah.
And if we're at the advices section, what would you advise someone who's already into computer science, who's a programmer but wants to level up, wants to get a better job, wants to work on more interesting topics?
Yeah, I mean, I think then it becomes you should take the impetus is on you to start working on better projects. So if you want to move away from like trivial questions that you find in a textbook, find a problem and start working on a solution to it. You can So I just like am a strong advocate for side projects. Like that's the one thing I can't emphasize that more, because that's when you get really into it, because you're finally working on something that you care about. You're not thinking about how Alice and Bob can like encrypt their key better or whatever, right? Like this is actually something that you care about, and so that makes you really excited to program. And then this will help you get into other companies, because they'll see that you've actually worked on real products and you're able to ship code, you're able to write code that does things that are actually useful for people. And I think that looks really attractive to companies, and it also takes you on this whole other level of programming, because I don't know if you would agree with this, but I think that when you're doing coding interviews and coding practice, it's a lot about like the fundamentals of like things that you never really work with when you're actually at a company. And so the only way then to actually work on things that you'll then see again when you go into industry is by starting by working on your own things. And they can be really simple projects too, but just like getting anything built, like this like minimum viable product, I think would be really great.
I'm also a big advocate of side projects, and I totally agree. Like there's almost no relationship between the interview question and the real project you're working on, at least for internships. Even though I understand why they do it this way, I assume that they think that if this person is able to understand this thing about computer science, this complicated hash map or binary search tree, he'll definitely be able to understand our internal framework with just us writing to a file.
And I also think it becomes like the questions they ask you during interviews are testing your thoughts. Again, they're testing how you think as a programmer. So that's why they are super valuable, because they're these really complicated questions that really show that you know your stuff. But then once you're actually in the company, you're using that same mindset, but you're applying it to completely different things. So kind of getting an early start at applying it to real world problems is really beneficial.
Okay. So do you have any interesting side projects that you want to share with the people, or things you're involved in, things that you want them to check out?
So in our organization at MIT that I think is like really great to look into for anyone like interested in becoming a better programmer is TechX. TechX has a lot of subcommittees in it, but some of the big things I think are beneficial for everyone is Hack MIT, which is one of the biggest hackathons in America, and it actually funds international students to come to it. And I think going to a hackathon is a really great way to get started on a side project. Like most of the projects that I work on, they were born in the like midnight frenzy of a hackathon. So Hack MIT is something I would really recommend looking into. And if you're a high schooler, there's a program called Think, which is it's a year-long kind of boot camp where you submit an idea that you have for a project, and MIT students and faculty will help you make it a reality if you're like selected in their batch. So I think these are like really great ways to get started working on work that you find is impactful and will make you better as a programmer.
Yeah, so check the links in the description. If you've liked this video, don't forget to hit the like button and to subscribe to our channel in order to be up to date with all of our new videos. If you have friends who want to become programmers, don't forget to share this video with them. And until next time, I wish you a really productive week. Hopefully you'll learn a lot of new things and you'll be a better programmer until we release our next video.